Hello, students. So one of the books that we are reading in this course is Better Than Carrots or Sticks. And this book has so many strategies that are very useful that we can use in our classroom to help us with students with disabilities, and some students who are high risk, students who need structure, just a diversity of students that we work with. There are a lot of strategies here that are worth taking a look at. So in this module, as you read the book, there are guided questions that you will ask towards the end concerning this particular book. But what I would like to do is share with you some takeaways that I got. What spoke to me when I was reading this book. So here are a couple of my takeaways. You can choose to see behavior in a punitive manner or from a restorative perspective. Your philosophy and orientation will determine how you see everything in the school environment. And that's pretty big. I'm just going to keep checking to make sure that you and I are seeing the same thing. So you'll see me going back and forth. So that's really important. As you read through the book, you might notice as you're reading it, you might have strong reactions to certain incidences or certain suggestions. And really, restorative justice is not necessarily a strategy. It's really a way of seeing things. It's a perspective. And there are a set of strategies that go along with that. But really, in essence, it comes back to how you see things. Are these things that happen, are they opportunities to learn, to teach, or are they situations where we need to, in a punitive way, to correct the student? And so sometimes the way in which we correct them in a punitive manner may not necessarily give us the outcomes that we're looking for. So there's a range of situations, there's a range of behaviors, but when you come into that, when you come into the environment or coming into the situation, what your perspective that you bring to it is going to make the reality of that situation vary. There is value in lessons, value and lessons in misbehaviors. So in one of your courses, you might have watched a movie, Rick Lavoie, who is special ed person who has done a lot of work in this area. And one of the things that he talks about is the social autopsy. So when we look at working with students, a lot of times we will help them with reading and writing. And if they make if there's a misreading, we'll tell them what the word is, or we'll help them. But students with disabilities in the behavior area, a lot of times there's certain behaviors they might not know, or they might not know what to do, or what is the right thing to do. So when we look at behavior, sometimes we have to treat that the same way, that we have to help the student understand the various ways in which they can exhibit a behavior, how a behavior might not be the best at a particular time. So there's so many lessons there. So if you're thinking from a restorative perspective or a supportive perspective, those misbehaviors, though there's lessons there. Looking at that from a punitive perspective can be very challenging, and you miss the opportunity, the teachable moments. So there are a lot of teachable moments in misbehavior. Shame, humiliation, and sarcasm are not teaching aids. And that's something that I got from this book, but also in my work as a teacher, especially sarcasm. Sarcasm is not a teaching aid, especially with students who do not get sarcasm. And when you are the teacher and you're using shame, humiliation, and sarcasm towards the whole class or to specific students, that's your modeling behavior. Create positive climates and focus on prevention. Develop clear, appropriate, and consistent expectations. Ensure fairness, equity, and continuous improvement. And continuous improvement is not just about the students, but also as a reflective practice for self. How could I have done this better? How could I have rearranged things so that students could perhaps get to the end goal, maybe in a more efficient manner? So as I'm sharing my takeaways, and I'm doing it before you read, as you read, maybe some of these will spark a moment where you're reading something and you say, ah, that's where she got that from. That's where that idea came from. Be intentionally inviting. Use a growth mindset approach. So I know you all have heard of growth mindset, and it is touched upon a little bit in this book, but be intentionally inviting. And if you do not know what that means, please make sure you zone in on that chapter, which talks about the 4 teacher types. You want to be intentionally inviting. Always be purposeful. The practice of empathy will cause you to be sensitive to students' needs and point you in the direction of appropriate action. Building trusting relationships and establish a rapport with your students. And let's not forget adults too. Bring the right attitude to school. So we are going to have an opportunity to engage in a couple, maybe 1 or 2 videos where we're looking at relationships with everyone in the building, but also with other adults in the building. So when we look at school climate and classroom management, which filters out to school environment, school culture, sometimes the adults in the building or the adults in the classroom, if you're working with an aide or you're working with a co-teacher, that is going to have an impact in the classroom, and especially in a co-taught classroom. So we have to think about building trusting relationships with the people that are in the room and the adults that are in the room. And we're going to touch upon that in another module in a different way. The book talks about it a little bit, but we also are going to look at that. And I think that is so important. If you and your co-teacher are having a lot of difficulties, that is going to make it very difficult to do the best you can. So it's really important to have that trusting relationship. Make sure your instruction is high quality and meaningful. Explain the why of the objective. This should always be, why are we doing this? Instruction should be high quality. Why are we doing this? And if you don't know why, then that's something to revisit, to make sure you can say, this is why we're doing it. And that actually is best practice and researched, that in effective teaching, when students know why they are engaging in something, there is a higher engagement level and a higher probability of the students completing the tasks that are for them. Develop a gradual release of responsibility. It's a strategy mentioned in the book. I won't go into it, but it's a good one. I've also had the pleasure of visiting a school that uses many of these strategies, and the gradual release of responsibility. I observed that in a classroom, and it the level of engagement of students as the teacher gave them more and more, and also used a lot of frames. So even with conversation, students knew how to speak to each other, or they knew what was the next piece that they needed to do in a project. The teacher did not do a lot of whole group lecturing, just sort of let the students know, okay, this is what we're doing today. You know what you need to do. And then the students go right into what they were supposed to do. It was very well orchestrated. So there are strategies for that. And I think this book talks about those pieces. So please make sure you take a look at that. Teach and allow students to collaborate. Teach and allow student collaboration to develop. Provide language frames to scaffold how to think and talk about topics. Social emotional concepts impact learning, the classroom, the school, the student. Embed ways to develop self-concepts, self-awareness, self-management, self-efficacy, self-determination, and self-monitoring. These are big for students with disabilities. Big, 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 big. Because these are some of the areas in which direct teaching is needed. You need to directly teach self-awareness, self-management, self-monitoring. So if you do not teach it directly, embed it, and if you're not going to say, okay, today we're going to learn a lesson on self-awareness, then embed it into your lessons where they have an opportunity to self-monitor. That's a big one. While they're working on a task, even if you have bullet points, or timing, or using a checklist to self-monitor. So there's information about that in this book. I think it presents it very well without going into it too much. So instead of reading a textbook, this very short, concise 6-chapter book, I think does a very good job of describing and providing information about these strategies. Capitalize on opportunities to point out the importance of social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making skills. Self-competencies, buzzwords. Okay, so these are some buzzwords, and these are some things that I picked up when I was reading the book, and that I also wanted to look up and keep in mind. So grit, how well students are able to persevere through setbacks to achieve important long-term goals. Growth mindset, student perceptions of whether they have the potential to change those factors that are central to their performance in school. Self-management, how well students manage their emotions, thoughts, and behaviors in different situations. So I just on a side, Panorama is just one program. So the book mentions social emotional concepts. So I add a couple of sites that I'm just mentioning here. Panorama is one of them. It's really great. It's a free website. So while I was reading the book, it made me think of Panorama. There's many free sites that go into social emotional learning and concepts, how to measure them, how to develop them. I will put the link to this one. There are a lot. A Panorama might be a much older one. So I'm going to add that. And then also at the end of this module, there will also be additional videos and resources to go with this that you can take a look at. These are some more of the concepts from Panorama. And think about it, when you're working with students, these are definitely the things that become problematic. and that we want to work on. So by teasing them out and thinking about it now, in the classroom management and thinking about, okay, how do I help students, even in the area of effort, right? So we think that there's something that we can't, we have no impact on that. Sometimes we think that, but we actually, you do. There are ways that we can engage students and we can really make them want to make an effort, because if there's a goal and they achieve a little bit and we show them, oh, you got this far, come on, you can do a little bit more. And if we scaffold that out in a certain way, we can actually reshape a student's behavior. So there's some behavioral interventions or behavioral pieces from behavioral science that help us understand that there are things that we can do to help students in these areas. Again, some of the other areas that are really important with social emotional learning, a sense of belonging, school safety, supports, teacher-student relationships, and so on. Just mentioning these. Again, you will become familiar with some of these in the additional resources to this particular module. Interesting. When we look at valuing school, right? How much students feel that school is interesting, important, and useful. I had a group of students, we were doing a project on places in my community. And you would think school would be the first thing. We were in school and they didn't even put school. It was shocking to me, but it was shocking to me on one level, but on another level was students with disabilities in self-contained classroom. And we're talking about all the wonderful things in the community and the places the students hung out and, you know, pizzeria, the this, that. Talking about community. Did not mention school till the end. So I was like, well, what about where we are right now? School? Oh yeah, school. So the value of school for those students, it really was very low. So that was a really good place to start with. Okay, so let's talk about how you feel about school and what's going on, and issues of do you belong, and how you're being received, and their perceptions of self. And so some adolescent students, a lot of adolescent students and those with disabilities, if school is your job, is your main job, and you're not good at it, then sometimes you can believe that you're not a good person, or you have a lower perception of yourself because I'm not good in school. I've never been, school is just not for me. And so it can really make a student feel that their place in school is not necessarily one where they sort of belong. And so then they have to create other identities. You know, be the kid that's in the gang, the kid that's tough, or the kid who's the sports, or the art kid, or the student that's really good with drama. So drama, theater, not just drama, not drama, that kind of drama, but theater. So there are other things, other ways that we can kind of use to support students while working with them on with the academics and helping them understand their place in academics. That academics does not define you as a person, and we just do it in school, and it's something that is like an occupational hazard. So these are the things that we have to be very mindful of on our end as we are looking at how we create this environment. Okay, so back to the book. Okay, so when in doubt, go with empathy. And empathy is coming from a place where I'm with you. I understand, and I'm trying to understand because I want to be there with you. Now, oh my God, that so sucks for you. That's pity. Students don't want that. And so really trying to understand, and empathy is extremely powerful. And sometimes there's times when we can't totally empathize. We're not there yet. But try it. So when in doubt, try to go with empathy. And sometimes students might be even telling you a story, an excuse that sounds so ridiculous, and you're like, okay, this can't be. But take a moment and kind of go with empathy and see where that leads you. When in doubt, go with empathy. That spoke to me. So these are just things that spoke to me from the book. Okay. Your classroom should have a procedure that is clear and consistent. It should be a routine, should be a procedure. Students know when we come in, we do this, this, this. Then this is going to happen, then this is going to happen, then there's going to be a closure, and then boom, the bell's going to ring, and there is a way that we exit this classroom. I like these classroom rules from the book. Take care of yourself, take care of each other, and take care of this place. It just seems to sum everything up. I know as a teacher, I used to have so many rules. And then when I saw it, when I was looking at this in the book, I was like, oh my gosh, this is really, really, really great. You know, take care of yourself, take care of each other, and take care of this place, meaning the classroom, this building. So if you're taking care of everything, then you should be responding to things in an appropriate, and as one principal that I absolutely admire, who always said, now somebody out there might know this, he would tell the students, school is a dignified place. And so no matter what they did or what they had to say, school is a dignified place. So if you are not acting dignified, you're not doing what you're supposed to do. So keep it simple. And they understand. Make informed decisions about student behavior from looking at the functions of behavior. So the functions of behavior, there will be, I will add a resource, additional chapter of a book that I wrote where it's so important to look at the functions of behavior. So determining what can be understood by the antecedents and the consequences, and always offer a replacement behavior. Please, that will help. So when you're working with students that have behavior, just stop doing that. Stop tapping, stop. Instead of tapping so loudly on the desk with your hand, could you just quietly pat your feet? There's a replacement behavior, especially ticking behaviors. Ticks should not be stopped. So you might feel like the student's doing something, you need them to stop doing that. It might really be something that they have to do. Instead of screaming, can you whisper? So giving them a replacement. When you offer a replacement behavior from a behavioral perspective, it gives the individual something to do. They have to do something. So it gives them something to do. So you're redirecting that. And always looking at the antecedents and the consequences. This class is not about that. I could do a whole class on that. However, the book touches upon it very well. And then I have a chapter about the functions of behavior for students with autism in the general ed setting. I will put that in the course for you to take a look at. You don't have to read it for this course, but you can have it. And there might be some strategies or information in there that you might find useful. Okay. You can de-escalate a student who is emotionally charged. You can. Take away from the book. We also are going to, in another module, talk more about that. You can change the reality of a situation by using identity building statements and agency statements. I love it. I'm not going to go into it because I want you to read it. I use these all the time. identity building statements and agency statements. And they work. It's so important to understand this and to know this as a strategy. It's very helpful. So read it, you're gonna love it. It's the simplest thing in the world, and it actually works. I've worked with some extremely difficult kids, and I use identity building statements all the time and agency statements. They work. Class meetings and circles are a game changer. So you're going to learn a little bit about that. And some of you might do circling already and think it's great. And some of you might think that this whole restorative justice is a bunch of nonsense. And that's okay. But circles, from preliminary research on what we've seen so far, circles make a difference. There isn't a statistic. It's mostly qualitative information, but you'll learn more about circles and see what that is. Teamwork, simple, teamwork. I'm not going to say anything about that. So as you're reading, just think teamwork. What's that about? Oh, and that is the end of my takeaways. So thank you. I hope you enjoy reading this book as much as I enjoyed reading it and sharing it with you. I'll see you next time. Okay. And let's see. Okay. I have to stop share. And let's see. Oh,